Strategies for boosting testosterone. Just received a comment in the direct messages asking that question of what are my top 3 recommendations for boosting testosterone. Well, of course, I cannot answer this without the help of Stephen Buhner in his amazing book, Natural Remedies for Low Testosterone, How to Enhance Male Sexual Health and Energy. And as Buhner has so well put it, we cannot answer that question without also including what are other factors in foods that may be decreasing testosterone. Now, women, they are very well in tune and know that they go through hormonal shifts, especially later in life. They have menopause, and us guys, we also go through a hormonal shift as we age, and it is called andropause, where a lot of our testosterone does begin to lower. And there are also certain lifestyle factors, pollution, that can even start that process earlier, cause us to have low testosterone. So there's many factors we need to be aware of, as well as some of the foods and herbs that are going to help increase it. So let's get into it. Some of the best herbs, foods for building testosterone. Number 1 is pine pollen. Now, pine pollen, this is an extremely nutritive food that does contain testosterone and other androgenic-like substances that is released by the pine tree in the spring. It's that yellow dust, that powder that just carpets the forest floor. Not just the forest gets into the cities. You can see that yellow dust on puddles and on cars. Now, extremely nutritive and does contain the highest amount of bioavailable, bioidentical testosterone for men, women equally to be able to utilize. Now, as a male, if you're going through that andropause and you find your levels lowering, or maybe it's for certain periods of life, maybe it's for training, maybe it's for building muscle mass. I have known women that have worked with the pine pollen as well in those instances. Now, if you really want that big testosterone boost, you will need to use the tincture. The powder is great, it's very nutritive, you're going to get a lot else with it, but specifically for the testosterone, it's much more potent and more effective if you get it in tincture form. A friend of mine who in his 40s had noticed testosterone levels had begun to decrease, and he got tested and confirmed, yes, my levels are quite low. He started taking the tincture, and within 2 weeks, he'd actually doubled his testosterone levels. We did a whole video, you can watch that on YouTube, where he talks about his journey and his results doing that. So that would be probably number 1 in terms of building and boosting testosterone levels in the body. Now, there are a couple of other herbs. Nettle root is a very good one, and that is a herb which has certain compounds that inhibit what's called sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG. Now, that's a compound that basically binds on to free testosterone, essentially removing it from the system or removing your ability to utilize it. Now, nettle root is very helpful in that case. Also happens to be really good for the prostate. Eleuthero, that's another fantastic herb. And one of the things I love about this book, Buhner, fantastic writer, he's written probably, I think, close to 15 books now. He really does. He breaks it all down. Every herb, every fruit he talks about the family, the common names, the part used, the cultivation of it, the collection, the habitat, its actions. So for instance, Eleuthero, just kind of run through, it's a mild androgen, it's an adaptogen, an anti-stressor, an immune tonic, immune potentiator, immunoadjuvant, adrenal tonic, increases non-specific resistance against a number of pathogens, cardiotonic, anti-rheumatic, increases cerebral blood flow, dilates blood vessels, and is an MAO inhibitor. He further goes on to talk about the chemistry. What are some of those compounds in this that are really helpful? What are the traditions, right? So in Ayurveda, this is a herb that wasn't really used, wasn't really known. In traditional Chinese medicine, right, used for over 2,000 years. Western botanic practice. Now, the Russians were very big on Eleuthero, and they helped coin that term, adaptogen. There's so much research that they've done on this herb and other herbs in particular. And he goes into the scientific research, right? So eleuthero contains 2 known androgenic substances, eleuteroside B1 and eleuteroside E. It has been shown to have an effect on the male reproductive health, increases the weight of the prostate, increases the seminal vesicles. It also is very useful in depression. It has MAO inhibitors, increases mental alertness, so on and so forth. So this one is definitely in his top herbs to take, as well as tribulus. Tribulus is a herb maybe you've heard of. He's got a great write-up on tribulus in here, some of its benefits and properties. And let me just cut straight to that one and share a little bit about it. All right, so studies have shown that tribulus increases serum levels of luteinizing hormone, which leads to higher levels of testosterone. Yes, and also increase of DHEA has been found in the body after taking tribulus. 3 times a day for 60 days, significantly increased sperm count, so on and so forth. So also a very good herb. Now those are probably the top 3, as well as he just mentioned about Panax ginseng and a couple of other ones as well. So we got nettle root, tribulus, eleuthero, pine pollen, ginseng. So those are all going to help increase those androgenic substances in the body, including testosterone. Now, there are things that we need to avoid as men. One thing that's very known, which comes down to lifestyle and certain lifestyle practices, as well as just being mindful of your environment, is avoiding what are called xenoestrogens. Now there's 2 different types of kind of estrogenic pollution, which can interfere with our male sexual health. And we have the phytoestrogens, I'll get to in a moment, and then the xenoestrogens. So the xenoestrogens, you've probably heard about, male fish or amphibians that become female, essentially. And it's basically because a lot of things like petrochemicals and plastics, they mimic estrogen in the body, and that begins to interfere with not only men's hormonal health, but also women's as well. So the best we can do is to avoid pollution like plastics, also have a daily regime of detoxing, helping our bodies remove that from our systems, things like clays, things like charcoals, and then just avoiding plastic when we can, not eating out of plastic, certainly not cooking out of plastic, hot liquids, those types of things. All right, now there are also the phytoestrogens. Now these are plant-based sources of estrogens which can affect our hormone levels. And a really great example where you can see the result of this is from a very well-known herb called hops. Hops is the main ingredient in beer, which is highly estrogenic. And have you noticed men who consume a lot of beer will sometimes develop those secondary sex characteristics of it's the boobs, it's the belly, it's this roundedness. It is very well known and documented throughout time since 1516, the Beer Purity Act, when hops was mandated to be the key herbal ingredient in beer for a number of reasons. It's very calming, pacifying. It's in fact a sedative. It's a nervine, but it also has this estrogenic effect. The women picking the hops in the fields noticed this. That had an effect on their cycle. Many women might drink hops tea or non-alcoholic beer to increase milk flow, increase lactation. And the monks were some of the primary brewers of beer at that time. It was helpful for them for decreasing libido. There was a phenomenon known as brewer's droop, if you know what I mean. So hops, we don't want to call it bad. We don't want to, a beer is good once in a while, but it's one thing that if this is something that you really are noticing an issue with, or you're really trying to increase testosterone levels, then hops is a herb you want to avoid. Licorice, in fact, is also another herb black cohosh, and then grapefruit also has an effect similar. So there's a few things to avoid, a few things to include, a couple of other kind of foods of noteworthy that he mentions in this book. Celery, fantastic herb. Of course, things like red meat and also pine nuts can be a part of your strategy. Now, if you really want to go into the depth of it, absolutely recommend the work of Stephen Herod-Buhner in this book in particular. Yes, the testosterone plant. All right.